Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, basically I just do reviews slash analyses, recommendations, deep dives, all the things. So if you like that kind of stuff, consider hitting the like button. I don't know, consider subscribing. And today I am doing an analysis on Weak Hero Class 1. I am so excited about this. I've definitely said that the last two videos, but I'm serious. It's like for good reason because I always really like the things I'm doing reviews and analysis on. So, anyways, you guys, I was gonna do a Dead Poet Society review slash analysis for fall because I was like, yeah, so fitting. But I have been working on this video, for almost 3 months. And I was so close to finishing it. I was in the last stages of editing, and it disappeared. So I'm refilming it. I just got done filming the intro and the whole recap, and I realized my light wasn't on. So I am truly trying my best here. If I don't get to this Dead Poet Society analysis, I have nothing to say for that, except that yeah. Anyways, I'm really gonna try and keep this intro short because I have so much to say. I'm like not even kidding. I had so many notes that it took me literally 3 weeks to just write a coherent script. My hair is being oh my gosh. It's being extremely annoying right now. So if my hair changes like 8 times through the video, pretend you don't notice. Anyways, just a couple notes before we continue moving on is that first, most of this analysis is just going to be a character analysis because most of the intrigue with the show really does come from the characters in here. Secondly, I know a lot of people didn't know or hadn't watched Weak Hero before its Netflix debut, so some people may be confused about the name, so I'm just gonna clear that up real quick. The original title was Weak Hero Class 1, only when the second season came out on Netflix, the title was just shortened to Weak Hero and the seasons were defined as classes. So you may hear Weak Hero Class 1, Weak Hero Class 2, Weak Hero Class 1, Season 2, Weak Hero Class 1, Season 1, Weak Hero, like you'll hear everything, okay? So that's just a forewarning. It's all the same show. I do use the terms interchangeably, so just know that I'm talking about the same thing. Weak Hero is a South Korean action crime drama. Maybe. I couldn't really come up with a better description or find a better description, so we're going with that. It's not really a just like drama in a traditional sense, but it's not really a crime drama in a traditional sense either, but it's somewhere in between, somewhere in the limbo. Anyways, it's an absolutely thrilling series directed by Yoo Soo-min and Park Dan-hee. It's actually based off of a webtoon of the same name by Saucepan and illustrated by Raisin. The show made its initial debut on November of 2022 and its second season releasing in March of 2025. Our story follows our main character who is a student and his name is Shion. He basically doesn't really care about anything other than studying and just being alone doing his own thing, but his quiet routine is disrupted when he seems to unintentionally upset a school bully, and this just leads to a long string of violence and crime. And now for our routine recap. I'm going to keep it pretty short because I'm assuming that most of you guys have watched it if you're here watching this video. However, it's very important to have a baseline for the analysis, so let's go. So our story follows two protagonists who are both students, and one is more of a main character than the other. So our really main character is Shion, and he's played by Park Ji-hun. And then our second lead is Suho, who is played by Choi Hyun-wook. So like I said, our main character Shion really doesn't care about much but studying, being alone, and just achieving his goals, which are being good in school. But one day he seems to upset a school bully who from there on out basically just tries to upset him and pick a fight with him. And one day his tactics do work because Shion fights back, okay? After a very, very gruesome fight, which ends with the bully, who is Youngbin, in the hospital, that's when people start taking him seriously, and they're like, dang. So during this time, around this time period, a friendship between our main characters, Suho and Shion, start to develop, and also a kind of side character who is Bomsok. Okay, a little friendship between them, a little trio action starts happening. This is when we find out that our school bully Youngbin is actually a part of this like unofficial kind of wannabe gang basically. And basically our school bully Youngbin tries to set up a fight between a couple of his gang members and basically jump our main character Shion, only it doesn't work and it just ends up with Suho and Shion beating up the rest of the gang members and getting out of there. So when the leader of the gang finds this out, of course he's upset and he demands to know who did it. So Youngbin sets up a trap to get Bomsok, Shion, and Suho all to talk to him. And during this meeting slash trap, the leader of the gang demands that the three boys come up with 50 million won in 3 days. And if they don't have it, he's basically gonna off them and their friends and family. And at the end of the 3 days, when the boys obviously don't have the money, Shion sets up a plan to essentially trap the leader of the gang and send him to jail. And of course, in typical TV show fashion, it doesn't go to plan. However, after many disruptions, many unforeseen events, it ends with the leader getting arrested. And this is when we find out about Bomsok and his abusive father and just his childhood growing up and everything like that. And tensions begin to rise between our two kind of side characters, Suho and Bomsok. Because Bomsok starts viewing Suho as very entitled and annoying and thinking he's better than everybody else. So it's getting a little icky in the trio group. So Bomsok starts distancing himself from Shion and Suho and starts hanging out and going to bars and clubs with the school bullies. Don't worry, we are getting into that later. I have some more notes, don't worry. So tensions continue to rise as Bomsok hires a fighter to beat up Suho. Yeah, tensions got pretty high, you could say. So basically the first plan for Suho to get jumped doesn't work because Shion finds out about it first, and he basically goes and takes the place of Suho. And although he tries to stand his ground, he gets beat up. I know I'm making it sound very, very goofy, so if you're here and you happen to have not watched it before, don't be like, girl, what is she describing? This is the goofiest show ever. Go watch it. I'm just dumbing it down a lot for the sake of brevity, so it's not stupid. Anyways, when Suho finds out about all this, he basically goes to Bomsok and the fighter that he hired directly, and he's essentially like, take it up with me. So basically, it's kind of hard to explain everything that happened in this whole scene, but a lot of fighting and a lot of tears. And basically, it ends up with Suho going into a coma. When Shion finds out about this, you can obviously imagine he is less than happy, a lot less than happy. And he goes around the school, like, I would say beating up, but not even beating up. Y'all, I am so hearing something. I thought I saw something, and then I didn't, and now I feel like I'm hearing things. Anyways, he starts brutally, like, he's just, I don't even have a word for it because it's not beating up. It's just like torturing, basically. That's a better word. He goes around torturing all the people that were involved with the whole plan or hurt Suho. After Shion's reign of terror, he is sent to another school, and the season ends with what we assume is a bully confronting him. So now let's get into the characters portion of this video. This show has insanely complex and realistic characters they're so intriguing, and the actors portrayed their characters with such care and just intricacy, and it shows throughout the show, both seasons 1 and 2. And I think the main thing about the show that really stands out is that these characters were both very, very interesting and very, very normal. And what I mean by that is if you were to meet one of these people in real life, you'd be like, wow, they're a very interesting person. I love talking to them, whatever. But we're also very fascinated by how realistic they are because we see them on screen and we're thinking, wow, this character is so round, they're so well done, they're so dynamic, they're so yada yada yada. So they're also intriguing in that way, just how well done they are and how much care is put into each of the characters' development. So, in other words, it's a really, really good balance between intrigue and realism. And something that is very unique with this show, I feel like, that you don't see as much in film or TV show or even books, is that each of the characters have characteristics that make sense for them based on their childhood and their experiences and even things that have happened to them pretty recently. But they also have a perfect level of unpredictability. And this makes sense because people's views and opinions are formed through their life experiences, right? That's what makes us individuals. But at the same time, we're not robots and we're not 100% dictated by these things. We're also unpredictable and impossible to understand and irrational at times, even. So, when writers know how to balance these aspects of human nature basically in their writing, it really does make a world of difference. And the writers in this show definitely, definitely did. Because when we have writers with this skill, we're much less likely to have super, super annoying characters, right? There's always that character that's frustratingly dictated by their emotions and fears and their past experiences and are never influenced by anything else. But then we also have those characters that are insanely unpredictable and just annoying because it's like they're always doing something crazy for no reason. And honestly, just doing things that don't even make sense. And don't hear what I'm not saying because you can have these type of characters definitely, but most of the time they're done wrong. And most of the time, they're just used as a crutch for the plot to ensue. Like, they have to do this very outlandish thing that somebody would never do just for the sake of the plot to go on. So since the characters in Weak Hero Class 1 are very realistic, it makes the plot inherently more realistic and helps the viewer actually get emotionally invested in what's going on. Now we're going to dive into Xian's character. Xian, y'all, I need a minute. Because Xian is a highly, highly, highly misunderstood character, and I will take this to my grave because so many people watch the show completely misunderstanding him or not understanding his complexity. Because on surface level, most people watch the show just thinking that Xian is this mean, like emo hermit that just wants to be alone and is like so cold-hearted, and Suho is like the only person that can crack into that cold heart and like make him laugh or whatever. And because of this, many people view Xian as a flat character throughout the entire show and never recognize his complexity. And honestly, it's a misconception that flat characters are inherently bad. I'm not saying flat characters are inherently bad. There's many great and amazing flat characters that we know and love. However, Xian is not that. He's the complete opposite of that. It just takes a little bit more to realize it. Now, what I'm about to say, you're gonna be like, girl. But Xian is a very highly emotional and emotionally complex person. He's very sensitive and deeply emotional. And yes, he was this from the very beginning, even though he always gave off the exterior of this cold, annoyed high school boy. And a lot of his character traits can be made sense of when we look back at his childhood and just his parents. His dad says he's proud of him. I'm actually pretty sure the first line that he says, that his dad says, was something like, You know I'm proud of you, son. But his words and his actions are just two different things. And his mom just wants what's best for him, but she just comes across as very domineering. Is that the right word, I think? Overbearing, domineering. She just comes across as very overbearing and only thinks about what she thinks is good for him, that kind of thing. And we don't really see the way that she basically disregards and ignores Shian's thoughts and feelings in the first season, but we see it a lot more in the second season. And because of this misunderstanding, there's a large emotional rift between him and his parents, and he just doesn't really talk to them. He doesn't feel comfortable around them. And we actually get fragments into his childhood that just kind of feed into everything I've just said and make sense of the way he thinks of himself. For example, in the beginning of episode 7, we get a flashback of him and his parents arguing over him. And he overhears the argument, and we find out that his dad sees him as abnormal because he's very weak and frail. And of course, he was a kid at this point, and as a kid, you're not thinking like, maybe my parents are going through something, maybe they had a hard day at work, maybe this, maybe that. And of course, he's thinking like, what's wrong with me? And this is a very crucial moment for him because right when his parents see him and they're trying to talk to him, he runs back into his room and locks the door, and he just starts studying. This is kind of where we see he got this habit of just isolating himself and studying. It's basically just to drown out his thoughts and to try and achieve something that he thinks he's good at, to prove to himself and to prove to his parents that he is not this abnormal, weak, frail kid, but he's good at things. And as I said earlier, Shion is a very deeply emotional character. And the reason people don't realize this is because he doesn't show these emotions. He experiences them very deeply, but that man don't express it. And because of his highly sensitive nature, he tends to remove himself completely from any vulnerability and instead isolating himself and studying. You know, this is his coping mechanism. And this forces Shion to become very self-sufficient and really rely on no one, which causes him to be very, very lonely. Yet he convinces himself that he likes it better this way because better to be lonely than to open up to someone and be hurt by them. So basically, Shion is literally the Grinch. Basically it. And this is further demonstrated when we get to see Shion's very analytical personality. You know, he cannot be wrong about things. He's constantly calculating every situation he's in, everything that's around him, to remain in control. Whether it's when he's in a fight or he's calculating his rate of success if he takes a certain move while playing pool, he is constantly analyzing. However, people are not something that Shion can analyze. They're unpredictable, and in his eyes, that means they're untrustworthy. So essentially, these misconceptions about Shion can be corrected and summed up with this. Shion seems independent and cold, but deep down he desires to be close with others. He intentionally detaches himself from others in fear of attachment or change because this would create a lack of control in his life. And lack of control is the biggest roadblock to Shion's success. And we actually see this very, very similarly in Suho, but it just manifests itself a bit differently. So now let's get into Suho's character. So similarly to Shion, Suho has to always remain in control. It's part of his personality. And just like every other character in here, this does stem from his childhood. Because we don't really get much from his home life, but we know that growing up he really didn't have much and still doesn't have much. So being actively in control likely meant surviving for him. This also plays into why Suho is such a great fighter and why he's so familiar with the hierarchy of power that violence brings among these kids. One of the biggest misconceptions about Suho is that he's a very, very mature and seasoned character. Because by the viewers and by everyone else in the TV show, he seems like a very sure of himself character. You know, he really knows who he is. And this is partially true, but as the show goes on, just like every other character in this show, we find out that he is a lot more than his surface level stereotypes. As the show goes on, we find out that Suho is actually quite of an emotionally immature character. And he doesn't really know how to express his thoughts and emotions in a rational and civil way. Because although Suho is at the very top of the school hierarchy, he's the top of the food chain, we realize that this confidence really comes from him learning to wield power over others and not an emotional immaturity and a place of knowing who you are and all that stuff. And I really like his character, especially in contrast to season 2 characters, because in season 1 it seems like everyone looks up to him in a very older brotherly kind of way. He's charismatic, he has 2 jobs, he's charming, he's all the things, he's everything that a 16-year-old boy would want to be. So it seems like he's kind of looked up to as mature in a hard-working kind of way. Whereas in season 2, we have these very emotionally sophisticated characters, characters who aren't afraid to express their mind, and they're very sure of themselves in a self-confident way, I guess. So I just really like the kind of contrast in types of mature characters. And I think the best demonstration of Suho's lack of maturity in the emotional area is demonstrated in the episode where Shion first smiles. This was when Suho was about to go to the hospital and he's like sitting in the back of an ambulance, I think, and he mumbled something about wanting ox bone soup. And it was genuinely just a little mumbling, like it wasn't even oh,
I wish somebody would bring me oxbone soup right now.
it wasn't even like that. He literally just mumbled because he's always mumbling something and he's always hungry. And later, lo and behold, Shion shows up with that exact soup and gives it to him. So instead of being like, oh, thank you, this was very, very nice of you, thank you so much, Suho is like very awkward about the whole situation, which, give him credit, Shion rarely ever expresses himself in such a forward way or expresses his affection for someone in such a forward way. So I think if he did this with any friend, they'd be a little taken aback. But of course, in very awkward Suho fashion, he just stares and he's like, what's wrong with this kid? And then he goes on elaborating that Shion is being way too nice, way too warm, and it's disgusting. Some translations of this say strange, but I'm gonna get into that a little bit later. And of course, it's completely a joke, and this is a joke that Shion laughs at. It's actually the first time he ever smiles.
Oh my god.
But this is just a very lighthearted and funny demonstration of Suho's emotional inexperience and his kind of inability to express his feelings in a way other than sarcasm. And honestly, it just reflects what you would expect most 16-year-old boys to be like. So I think that's why so many people really, really like this scene. And it's a very sarcastic and goofy way for Suho to say thank you, but nonetheless, it is very Suho. Now, speaking of Suho's humor, let's get on to a section about Suho's humor. The reason I'm kind of making this a whole section is because there's a lot of it that's kind of lost in translation, and it really adds a lot to Suho's character and just the dynamics between him and other characters. And I will say Hyunwook, who plays Suho, did a very, very good job at portraying his humor in a way that kind of transcends translation, I guess. So most of the time we could understand the intent of the joke, even if we didn't get the cultural significance of it. So round of applause, Hyunwook, for being a great actor. But I saw a Jenny Lee video kind of really diving deep into all of his humor and everything that was lost in translation. So I'm going to reiterate a couple of the really big points that she made just because I don't have the personal expertise to be yapping 100% about this, but I just wanted to give credit to her video because that's where a few of these big points came from. But of course, I will be adding my own elaboration and opinions. So one of the big examples of Suho's humor was him calling Shion she. Now, if you've watched K-dramas before, which I'm assuming you might have picked up on the honorifics that they used and when they use them, so you may know what this means, but I'm always assuming that people may not know certain things. If you don't know, you don't know. So basically, she is just a suffix that you would add to someone's name to show respect. she would be used in an instance where you would want to be polite with that person. Usually you don't really know them that well, but you're still speaking very kindly and politely. In other words, you usually don't hear it when you're talking directly to your close friend. But Suho does use it in Xian's instance, and he uses this in a very joking manner, likely pointing out Xian's very cold and standoffish demeanor. Another thing that he did often was he referred to himself in the third person as Hyung, okay? And of course, you may already know what this means, but in case you don't, Hyung is basically just a term used by younger males talking to older males to show respect or like closeness. But since they're all the same age in this drama, they're all in the same grade, there's no need to be calling people Hyung. But nonetheless, it still adds to his humor and it still adds to the show. For example, he'd say something like, just trust Hyung. Hyung's got this, that kind of thing. And even though there's technically no need to use Hyung in this situation, it's still funny and it still adds to his humor because he's almost calling out his stance among the friend group and among the school. He's the top of the hierarchy, okay? And so I really, really appreciated that aspect of his humor. Now, let's talk about Xian and Suho. So, Xian and Suho's dynamic is, you guessed it, highly misunderstood. And again, once again, it is very unfortunate because it really does add a lot of depth. Okay. I'm literally going to be repeating the same thing because apparently I don't know what a freaking synonym is. But anyway, it is unfortunate because it really does open the door to a lot of different interpretations of the story once you kind of realize the realities of Xian and Suho's dynamic. See, the thing is, most people think that Suho is interested in Xian from the get-go because he just thought Xian was interesting, or like he had a little crush on him. I don't freaking know. But guys, it is so much deeper than that. There's so much going on between the two of them, and if you just like skim it off at the top as, oh, he just thought he was interesting, it's kind of doing a disservice to everything that's actually going on there. Because once you really dig into each of the characters as individuals, you really get to see that Suho was so interested in Xian in the beginning because he saw a sensitiveness inside of Xian that he wanted to protect. And this is a sensitiveness that Suho had to sacrifice a long time ago, and he wanted to protect this gentleness that still existed inside of Xian. Suho had to give up being vulnerable and being sensitive a long time ago because being vulnerable meant being weak for him, and being weak literally meant not being able to survive. And so when we see Suho in this way, we really get to understand why he has so much inexperience in his emotional side, I guess, and why he is so reluctant to be vulnerable and never can express what he means clearly and thoroughly. And we get a little bit of this in the scene where Suho and Xian are fighting. I think what's really, really important in these situations are to read the subtext and to have the emotional intelligence to understand the subtext that's going on in between these conversations, because this is where you're getting most of the explanation behind the characters and where you get to really feel who they are as people. So in this situation where Suho is teaching Xian how to fight, he says, the next step is to take your fist and beat. Never mind, just run. It's better to run. Run away while the other guy's down because you might get hurt fighting him. If there is one thing we know about Xian, it's that man can take a punch or two, okay? He can take 3 or 4, actually, 5 or 6 at that. So yes, to a certain extent, Suho is likely worried about Xian's safety, but if there's one thing we know about Suho, it's that his conversations are always filled with subtext. And again, this weaves itself into Suho not being able to express himself clearly or express his emotions and that kind of thing. So him telling Xian to run is likely less of him worrying about Xian's safety, but more of him wanting to preserve that innocence and gentleness inside Xian. He doesn't want Xian to become desensitized to all this violence and lose that side of himself like Suho had to do a very, very, very long time ago. And we can also see more of Suho in different aspects than just his subtext, obviously. For example, even when Suho is doing something objectively good or maybe doing something bad to serve a higher justice, we can see his immaturity in that as well. Because he doesn't know how to handle things in a mature or rational way, he settles it with violence. Whether he's mad, sad, angry, whatever it is, he's always going to come back to hurting somebody or making somebody pay the price for something. So really, Suho at his core is just a normal person, but he uses violence as self-preservation. It's not good, but that's who Suho is, and we can see it in every aspect of his life. Now let's narrow it down a little bit and talk about Shion and Suho's influence on each other. One of the reasons why Shion and Suho's relationship is so deeply influential is because it forces each of them outside of their comfort zone. For Shion, he's forced to open up to somebody, he's forced to be vulnerable, and for Suho, it forces him to go out of his way and to really care about somebody. It causes both of them to sacrifice different aspects of control in their lives in order to be friends with each other. And because of Suho's emotional immaturity and Shion's high emotional intelligence, it forces them both to grow. Let me explain. For example, when Bomseok starts distancing himself from Shion and Suho, Suho does everything to avoid being played or feeling hurt. He starts being mean back to Bomseok, starts fighting with him, doesn't talk it out, doesn't try to think why he's being like this. He immediately just goes into self-preservation mode. But then we have a contrast with Shion, who's already in too deep. He's already opened up to Bomseok, and Bomseok is a part of his life now. He will fight and do anything to save it. And we can see it in a moment where he's talking with Suho and he says, I think Bomseok did it because he was lonely. I don't have the words, but that's just how I feel. And this just demonstrates Shion's emotional intellect and awareness to be able to feel others' emotions so deeply and not even have the words to explain what it is, but he's just feels what's going on. And I think this is very relatable for a lot of us emotional people. And so this is the aspect that we don't really see that much in characters or in film. And so I think I really, really appreciated this kind of character. And so even though Shion doesn't really know how to say what he means, he feels it and he trusts it. And so to kind of sum up their dynamic a little bit, Suho does so much for Shion, and Shion puts so much trust in Suho. And these are things that they avoided like the plague itself before they met each other. In short, their relationship is so complex and close because it was Suho's first time wanting to be close with someone, and it was Shion's first time letting himself be close with someone. Now, y'all. This is a section for sure. All right. We're going to be talking about Bomseok. And honestly, there's a lot. Girl. This chair loves interrupting me. Anyways, he's a very sticky situation. Like, this whole conversation is very sticky situation. However, Bomseok. Bomseok is the definition of people wanting more complex characters and then they cry when they get Bomseok. I am so serious when I say Bomseok is one of the most dynamic and complex and hard to understand, but also, wait, I literally understand everything you're saying and doing right now, character out there.
I can't. Get out.
Because yes, nobody likes him. Nobody likes him. He made my blood boil to where when I went to rewatch the first season so I could take notes on it, when I saw his face, it was like a visceral reaction. I'm so serious. Nobody likes him, and for good reason. However, he is no less interesting and incredibly created. So, Bomseok had a very rocky childhood, as I mentioned earlier, his abusive father, being adopted, everything like that. And so, because of this, it made him constantly question his self-worth, therefore putting it in other people. He really does seek his worth in his friends and what people think of him and how he makes other people feel. And it really reflects throughout the entire show. He has this deep-seated need to feel at home and for people to like him. For example, we saw it when he followed Suho on Instagram, that whole situation, and the whole thing where Suho didn't follow him back, and the situation basically ruined him. And his insecurities are continued to be fed throughout the show, and we can specifically see it in one episode where Suho asks Bomsok to hang out over the weekend, and he just feels like he's third wheeling the whole time, basically. It's really important to note that most of the authorities in his life abuse their power and abuse him. And so, in his mind, the only way to stop the cycle of abuse is to become more powerful than the abuser. And if you really think back and kind of pinpoint a moment where he started changing, you can really see it in the one episode where he's running from his bullies after the whole karaoke thingy. So basically, he's at these karaoke rooms and he sees these bullies from his old school who used to beat him up and basically terrorize him. So he leaves the place and he's essentially running from these bullies and they're chasing him. Well, he runs into these bullies at his school. So it's just like, it's a bully frenzy over here, okay? Although they never really did anything to him particularly, so he's like low-key chill with them. So nonetheless, the new bullies at the new school teach the old bullies at his old school a lesson, which is literally the most like, girl, are you being for real moment right now? Because what do you mean evil people are teaching evil people a lesson? Like, and to say the least, the old bullies did not dare to mess with Bomsok anymore. And so we see in this moment that Bomsok didn't change because he wanted to feel better than others, or he wanted to be powerful, or he wanted to fit in. He did it for self-preservation. And in fact, we see this closer to the end when tensions are really reaching a peak. Suho keeps saying mean and just crude things to Bomsok, like provoking him. And we as the audience are thinking, bruh, if you would literally just be nice, just say a kind word, even if you don't mean it, he would probably drop this whole thing. He would probably forget about it, take the money back, not have hired this man. Like, everything would have been fine and dandy and you wouldn't be in a coma right now. Because closer to the end, as the tensions were rising and tensions were peaking, we kind of get the vibe that Bomsok might have called off the whole thing and he was starting to cool down and kind of realize the full gravity of what he had been planning to do. But definitely now, with all the crap that Suho is spewing at Bomsok, he's definitely not forgetting about it now. And we actually see when Suho gets to the site where the whole fight happens, he realizes that he's provoking Bomsok. He realized that this was only going to make Bomsok even more mad. And he wasn't doing it because he was super confident that he was going to win. Because that's just not who Xian is. If he's been wronged or someone he loves has been wronged, he's not just going to let it go by, you know? He's going to take it up, and that's just who he is. But just before the fight, we're like, OMG, there might be light at the end of the tunnel. Suho apologizes. However, in exchange for his apology, he says that Bomsok has to apologize to Xian. And as you can imagine, Bomsok doesn't agree with this, and he says that he has nothing to apologize for. Okay. And this shows that it would have always happened, or it would have always ended in tragedy of some sort, no matter how much Bomsok was included, or no matter how nice Suho was to Bomsok. It would have always ended badly because it was never about Suho. It was always about Bomsok needing to fill his insecurities, needing to fill that void inside him by projecting his faults and insecurities onto Suho. Because he was never mad at Suho. He was mad at himself because in pursuit of proving his dad wrong, all those insecurities that his dad had planted inside of him, he simply became his dad. He became the nasty and angry abuser that his dad was. And we see it so clearly because when Suho wouldn't wake up, he started crying because he had a moment of clarity. Because here he realizes that it was really never about Suho. This is when the gravity of the situation and the gravity of his immaturity really hits him. Because he really didn't mean any of it. He just needed to feel in control. He needed to feel respected, and he needed to feel like he wasn't just a human punching bag to be pushed around. And in his mind, the only way to do that was to be feared. And once we see Bomsok as just a boy who wanted to stop feeling the way he did and ended up becoming what he hated the most in life, it makes his story so much more sad, and you just feel worse for him. I think it's hard to see because the whole time you're just so mad at him. Once you really think about it and really internalize it, you realize just how sad his story is. Now, let's move on a little bit more broad, kind of tied in with this, but let's talk about the trio dynamic. So the dynamic between these three characters, Shion, Suho, and Bomsok, are actually demonstrated physically when we get a flashback. So basically we see Shion and Suho sitting right one behind the other, both facing the front of the room. And then we see in front of Shion, we have Suho, but he's facing the back of the room. And in the beginning, we actually see Suho and Bomsok talking to each other, even though Shion's sitting in the middle. We see them talking to each other, and they're just having normal, fun conversation. And this shows us that Bomsok really was included. He was always included. And Shion and Suho really did like him. But for Bomsok, it always felt like Shion was just in the way of Suho. Like, it would always be Shion and Suho plus Bomsok. And we see throughout the whole conversation that Shion doesn't really talk to Bomsok at all until Suho has to leave. That's when he turns around and starts talking to Bomsok. And this really shows that Shion did like Bomsok, but to Bomsok, it seemed like he only paid attention to him when Suho wasn't around. And there's actually a specific scene where we finally get kind of clarity on the whole relationship and dynamic between Shion and Bomsok. And this is the scene where Shion is kind of taking revenge on everybody in the school for hurting Suho. And honestly, the audience, they're holding their breath and they're like shaking in their seat because we're expecting him to get to Bomsok and literally pummel Bomsok into oblivion. But that's not at all what happens, because once he gets to Bomsok, he actually starts crying uncontrollably, and the only thing he can manage to say is, "Why? Why did you do it?" To which Bomsok replies, "I have no idea why I did it. You should understand me, Shion." He gets up without hitting him and slowly walks out of the room. And this is the moment where we finally get it. And we finally understand all the mystery surrounding Bomsok and Shion's relationship. Because these two are painfully similar. And they're so similar in a destructive kind of way. Everything that they do is to prove their insecurities wrong, and it's a core part of who they are. A core part that influences every decision they make and who they're friends with and everything in their life, basically. And it's not similar in a Shion and Suho kind of way where they're so similar, but they help each other grow and it forces each other to give up aspects of their control and yada yada yada. Them being together is so destructive because it makes their insecurities blaringly obvious and amplifies them. Now, let's talk about the emotional conflict of this whole scene. When people think of Weak Hero, they think of this scene. They think of Shion's reign of terror throughout the school, and they think of Shion slamming his fist through the wall and screaming at everybody. This is the pivotal moment in this show, and this is because not only is it a well-written, well-directed, well-acted scene, I mean, everything about it is just well planned and well executed, but there is a small aspect. Now, it's a small aspect with a big impact, I should say, and it's commonly overlooked. And that aspect is the music placement in the background. Now, the easily identifiable aspect of the song in the background is that it's sad and somber and it amplifies those sad feelings, and that's about it. I mean, that's all we're really trained to think when it comes to songs in the background. However, the lyrics in the background as well add some layers to the narrative. Now, you might be saying, like, girl, this is a stretch, but hear me out first. The song starts off with, "I miss the memories, I miss your tune. I miss the compliments, the smile on your face. It was only just yesterday." This could also just be written off as a song about Suho and Shion in the very beginning, right? I mean, Xian already misses him. It's only been yesterday. Oh my gosh. It was only just yesterday that he went into a coma. Yada yada, whatever. But as the song goes on, it kind of becomes even more clearly about Bomseok and Xian, as if the fact that the scene was with Bomseok and Xian wasn't enough. But I mean, truly, it really describes exactly what you would imagine in their relationship. Xian is reminiscing about all the good times he had with Bomseok and kind of seeing Bomseok in a new light after all of this. And he's focusing on the good things and all the memories that he made with Bomseok. And he's realizing how much he really did like him and how much he took that for granted. And it was only just yesterday that Bomseok did this awful, awful, horrible thing to Suho. It was only just yesterday when the Bomseok that he loved died. And the lyric continues saying, "How deep are you, no tracks to follow? How bold am I to face you hollow?" This is Xian really recognizing the depth inside of Bomseok and the depths of his pain and hurting. And honestly, as we know, it is rare for Xian to be in a position of power over somebody and not take that. And it's even more rare for someone to be in a position of physical power over Bomseok and not hurt him. Because Xian not hurting Bomseok in this situation was not him having a change of heart or just like deciding not to do it anymore. He gave up, got too tired or something. This is him recognizing Bomseok as a person, and it's him recognizing the pain that he's been through and recognizing how similar they are and choosing not to hurt him, choosing not to become just one of his other abusers. And it keeps going. It says, "Am I nothing to you? Am I nothing to you?" And this is Xian wondering if it even mattered. If this was as big a deal to Bomseok as it was to Xian. Girl, sensitive person 101. Like honestly, I said it before and I'll say it again. This type of character isn't really represented a lot, and honestly, Xian just feeling everything for those he loves and always questioning if this is just him. It's like, girl, give me a hug. Give me a hug. And as he's walking down the hall, people are crowding him, yelling his name, and he does the whole fist through the window and screaming thing, and then he continues walking down the hall, and the lyrics continue, and they say, "I feel my faith, my heart is racing. I want to dive into your warmth. Even if I do, even if I trust you, do you feel nothing? You must feel nothing."
You got
Xian still loving Bomseok, but knowing that he can never be close with him again. And this is actually shown in season 2, just how much he truly was intertwined with Bomseok because of how similar they were. But as he walks into Suho's hospital room and sits down in the chair beside his bed, the final lyrics ring out and they say, "I finally do make up my mind. It's time I lose you for good." Xian decides that he's letting it go. Everything, all his wonders and what ifs, he's not going to let that affect him anymore, and he's letting it go. And the final lyric of that song, which fades out before you, like right before you can hear it, is, "I'm lost again." And I really, really wish that that was kept in because I feel like it would kind of round up the whole summary of the Bomseok and Xian story. But as we know, Bomseok does a little bit of haunting the narrative in season 2, so I feel like he's still kind of, the story isn't finished in season 2, to say the least. And when you think about it, the pure idea of having this song in the background seems very cringe, you know? A song that's perfectly describing the situation to a T and the inner thoughts and feelings of the main character. It just seems very, very Love Island, I guess. Although it seems very obvious, the scene is very emotionally intense and there's a lot going on, so you're more likely for the song to fade in the background because you are wrapped up in the emotions and what's really going on in the scene. And in addition to that, the lyrics have many layers of meaning and can be somewhat ambiguous. I don't know why I said it like that. Anyways, the lyrics can have certain interpretations, and so it kind of allows for a lot of interpretations to be held. And also, since most of the time throughout movies and TV shows, we are very wired to think that songs in the background are just vaguely representative of the moment, because they usually are. They usually just have a similar vibe, maybe a line or there or two that links up with the moment. But most of the time, we really don't see songs that link up perfectly with the moment because the pure idea is just cringy. So you're less likely to really notice it and like be focusing 100% on that. So I think this is why most people wouldn't really realize the intentionality of the song in the background until a second or third watch. We are finally to Anyways, now we are finally making it to the plot. We have made it finally after however long it has been of characters. One thing I really appreciate about this show is it is extremely hard to make a show that is primarily about fighting actually fun and interesting for one season, much less 2 seasons. I mean, not only does it maintain its excitement and awesomeness throughout the 2 seasons, but it grows throughout the 2 seasons. And the reason for this is we expect certain things. We're kind of wired to think a certain way when it comes to crime or fighting dramas. We often see tension being built for a few minutes, and then we get a really good, well choreographed, action packed fight that is very fun to watch. And that's pretty much it. And I mean, not even just with action and crime dramas, with regular crime shows and with regular action movies and action shows. And these are just very stereotypical genre elements that we see a lot. And we're kind of wired to expect them when it comes to these type of things. And this is where Weak Hero is so different, because if it followed this very basic formula that we see a lot, it would have never made it 2 seasons long with the viewership and the fan base that it did. The intensity in the show was really built throughout small increments of anticipation. For example, in the first few episodes when the plot is unfolding, we are watching the episodes with the background knowledge that in 3 days, the boys have to have 5 million won. Okay, so I definitely didn't articulate what I was trying to get across very well, so I'm gonna try and restate everything in a bit more of an eloquent way. So essentially what I was trying to say is that in each season, there's kind of a ticking time clock to the big event that ends the season. Basically like a climax, but not a climax in a traditional storytelling sense. It's almost like the climax is at the very end, and then there's a really short falling action and resolution. And in season 2, we knew exactly what this big event was going to be, and that was the big fight between the two schools. However, in season 1, we're not sure what this big event is going to be, but we can feel the tensions rising and we know that something is coming. And the point that I was trying to make is that in both season 1 and 2, there's kind of more miniature ticking clocks throughout the episodes. And these act as kind of mini anticipation points that keep you moving through each episode very effortlessly and kind of keeping up with everything, and also preparing you for, the really large climactic event at the end. And even though both season 1 and 2 have a very linear plot structure of kind of building up to one very big thing at the end, it feels fresh and unique both times, because we don't really know where all this tension is building up to in the first season. And even though we do in the second season, there's so many variables constantly swaying the plot and constantly making the characters see everything from a new angle. So it really feels like 2 different stories and 2 very unique and individual plots. And one other thing I liked is even simple things didn't really turn out how you thought they were going to be with just a climactic fight, For example, even with the whole situation with the gang leader where they're trying to get the gang leader arrested, it's not what we're really thinking, because when Suho doesn't immediately pay up, we're thinking, oh, a fight's gonna go down right here. Somebody's losing a tooth or something. But that's not at all what happened. Instead, the scene turns into a plan by the main characters to put the leader in jail, but it goes wrong and kind of turns into this strange hostage situation. And just when you think we're about to get this big fight, we end up getting a very intense chase until we finally get a fight. And in addition to this, it's not just a who beat who rival situation, like, oh, good triumphs evil. Each person has their own motivations and emotional conflicts that forces them into the situations they are. They have their own reasons for being in this fight and for being associated with everything. And so it just makes the whole thing a whole lot more authentic and real feeling to the viewers. Another thing that I really liked about the show was the kind of good versus bad mercy rules that were going on. For example, when one of our antagonists were at the mercies of our protagonist, they would beg and plead for them to be spared and all this stuff. Now, traditionally, we would think, yes, they beat them, bye bye bad guy. But that's really not how it happens in real life, and that's definitely not how it happened in this show. Because the antagonist will absolutely beg for mercy not to be beat and everything, but the moment they're in a position where they can take advantage of our protagonist, they're gonna do it because they're egotistical maniacs and they need to feel in power of everything. Now, let's talk about character arcs. Now, yes, I could have put this in the character section, I know, but I feel like it had more to do with the characters in relation to the plot structure, so I put it in the plot section, okay. Anyways, the show really challenges the stereotypical plot structure of a good, well-written character. Shion is a particularly interesting example because often in film, books, or TV shows, we will see a character going outside of their comfort zone, doing something they don't like, growing from it, and inherently becoming a better person, and yay, it's celebration. And yes, we see part of this in his narrative. We see him going outside of his comfort zone and he learns to be friends with people and open up to people. And this is where we would usually see a big change, where he grows from the situation and it has a good impact on his life. However, in Shion's situation, what he was afraid of happening is exactly what happened. Oh, okay. He opened himself up to Bomseok, he let him in, he was friends with him, and he ended up being hurt and betrayed by him, which is exactly what he was afraid of happening. This causes him to simultaneously go back to his isolating ways while also pushing himself to be more vulnerable. Let me explain what I'm trying to say. Because of being betrayed, it causes him to go back to his old ways of isolating himself and not trusting anybody, not wanting to be close with anybody. However, he doesn't give up on Suho. Suho is basically his last hope. Suho is the only person that sees Shion for who he is and is there for him no matter what. With Suho, Shion can be the version of himself that's vulnerable and kind and gentle, and the part that he has to hide with everybody else. So he pours everything into the possibility that he will wake up and that he will have a friend again, and he pushes himself to be that version of himself. And we even see it when he's talking to Suho in his hospital bed. It's when he imagines Suho waking up. He imagines Suho waking up and Suho cracks a few tired jokes as he does, and Shion apologizes. He apologizes for everything. And we see that if Suho woke up, Shion would be that person. He would be the person that doesn't hold back, the person that's honest and vulnerable with him. And so he's putting basically everything into Suho because if Suho wakes up, then maybe this would be worth it. Maybe all this pain that he went through would be worth it. Maybe opening himself up and getting hurt wouldn't all go to waste. So by the end, he's going down both a good and bad path. He's both growing and self-destructing on the last episode. Anyways, you guys, I am so glad you made it to the end of this video. That is literally insane. Thank you for listening to me yap this whole time. I really, really hope you enjoyed it. I know there are so many Weak Hero fans out there on the internet, so I'm hoping this reaches a few of you. Maybe you just finished it and are scouring the internet for any and everything. That was me, honestly. I hope you really enjoyed this. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I love reading them. And yeah, let me know what y'all think I should do next. Anyways, until next time, guys. Bye.